What if I told you that one of the most powerful cities on Earth once stood in the middle of a lake, in the heart of what is now Mexico? A city larger than London at the time, a city of white temples, floating gardens, massive marketplaces, and causeways stretching across the water. And then, in just 2 years, it was gone. But that is only one chapter in a story that stretches back thousands of years, because the history of Mexico did not begin with conquistadors or revolutions. It began with farmers, astronomers, builders, and civilizations that shaped an entire continent. Long before the word Mexico existed, the land we know today was home to some of the most advanced societies in the ancient world. Around 7000 BC, early communities began domesticating maize. This was more than agriculture. It was a turning point in human history. Corn became the foundation of culture, religion, and survival. Villages formed. Trade networks expanded. Ritual life became more complex. By 1500 BC, the Olmecs emerged along the Gulf Coast. Historians often call them the mother civilization of Mesoamerica. They carved colossal stone heads weighing up to 20 tons. No metal tools, no wheels for transport, just engineering skill and organized labor. The Olmecs introduced artistic styles, religious symbols, and political systems that influenced nearly every civilization that followed. Then came the rise of great urban centers. Teotihuacan, founded around 100 BC, became one of the largest cities in the world. At its height, it may have held over 100,000 people. Its Pyramid of the Sun still stands as one of the largest pyramids ever built. But Teotihuacan was not just large, it was organized. Grid planning, multifamily apartment compounds, trade routes reaching deep into Central America. This was not a primitive society. It was a superpower of its time. And yet, around the 6th century AD, it collapsed. Its temples burned, its population scattered. The reason remains debated even today. Further southeast, another civilization flourished, the Maya. The Maya were mathematicians, astronomers, architects. They developed a sophisticated writing system and a calendar more accurate than Europe's centuries later. Their cities, like Tikal, Palenque, and Chichen Itza, were political and religious hubs. They studied Venus, predicted eclipses, and built pyramids aligned with celestial events. But Maya history was not one continuous empire. It was a network of competing city-states. Alliances shifted, rivalries grew. Some cities were abandoned, others rose. And then, in the 1300s, a new power emerged in central Mexico. The Mexica people, later called the Aztecs, were originally migrants. According to legend, they were told by their god to build a city where they saw an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. They found that sign on an island in Lake Texcoco. There, in 1325 AD, they founded Tenochtitlan. Within 2 centuries, Tenochtitlan became one of the most impressive cities in the world. Canals flowed through it, causeways connected it to the mainland. Markets attracted tens of thousands of traders daily. Through alliances and military dominance, the Aztecs built an empire that controlled much of central Mexico. Tribute flowed into the capital, textiles, food, precious stones, cacao, but their power came with resentment. Many conquered peoples paid heavy tribute. By the early 1500s, the Aztec Empire was strong, but politically fragile. And in 1519, ships appeared on the horizon. Men from across the ocean had arrived, and Mexico's history was about to change forever. When Hernán Cortés landed on the coast of Mexico in 1519, he did not arrive with a massive army. He had a few hundred men, horses, steel weapons, and ambition. What he also had, though he did not fully understand it at first, was timing. The Aztec Empire was powerful, but not universally loved. Many city-states under its control resented the heavy tribute they were forced to pay. Cortés quickly formed alliances with these rivals, especially the Tlaxcalans. What began as a small expedition became a growing coalition. Then came something even more devastating than steel: disease. Smallpox spread rapidly among indigenous populations who had no immunity. Entire communities were weakened before they could fully resist. In 1521, after months of siege, starvation, and destruction, Tenochtitlan fell. The Great Lake City was reduced to ruins. On top of those ruins, the Spanish built Mexico City. And so began 3 centuries of colonial rule. the land became known as New Spain. It was one of the most valuable territories in the Spanish Empire. Silver mines in places like Zacatecas and Guanajuato produced immense wealth. Trade routes connected Mexico not only to Europe, but also to Asia through the Manila galleons across the Pacific. Mexico became a global crossroads. Catholic missionaries spread Christianity across the region. Churches and cathedrals rose where temples once stood. Indigenous traditions did not disappear completely. Instead, many blended with Catholic practices, creating a unique cultural identity that still shapes Mexico today. Colonial society, however, was deeply hierarchical. At the top were Spaniards born in Europe. Below them were Criollos, people of Spanish descent born in the Americas. Then came mestizos, people of mixed indigenous and Spanish ancestry. Indigenous communities and enslaved Africans occupied the lowest levels of the social structure. Opportunities were limited. Power was concentrated. By the late 1700s, ideas of liberty and self-government were spreading across the Atlantic world. Revolutions in the United States and France inspired thinkers across Latin America. In 1810, a Catholic priest named Miguel Hidalgo Aylló Costella rang the church bells in the town of Dolores and called for independence. His speech, known as the Grito de Dolores, sparked a massive uprising. The struggle lasted over a decade. Leaders rose and fell, armies clashed, regions divided. Finally, in 1821, Mexico achieved independence from Spain, but freedom did not bring stability. The newly independent nation faced enormous challenges. It had inherited a colonial economy dependent on mining and agriculture, but lacked strong political institutions. Internal divisions grew between conservatives and liberals, centralists and federalists. At one point, Mexico even briefly became an empire under Agustín de Iturbide. In the 1830s and 1840s, tensions with the United States increased. Texas declared independence from Mexico in 1836. A decade later, conflict between the two nations resulted in Mexico losing a vast portion of its northern territory, including present-day California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and Utah. The loss reshaped Mexico permanently. In the mid-1800s, internal conflict continued between liberal reformers and conservative factions. Benito Juárez, a Zapotec indigenous leader, emerged as a key figure. He pushed for reforms that reduced the power of the military and the church, strengthened the Constitution, and promoted secular government. For a brief period, even a European archduke, Maximilian of Austria, ruled as Emperor of Mexico, backed by foreign interests. But his rule was short-lived. He was eventually removed, and the republic was restored. By the late 1800s, Porfirio Diaz came to power. Diaz ruled for more than 3 decades. His era brought modernization. Railroads expanded, foreign investment increased, cities grew. Mexico began industrializing. But this progress came at a cost. Land became concentrated in the hands of a few elites. Rural farmers lost their property. Workers faced harsh conditions. Political opposition was suppressed. Economic growth did not mean equality. By 1910, frustration exploded into revolution, and this revolution would redefine Mexico's identity for the next century. By 1910, Mexico looked modern on the surface. Railroads stretched across the country. Foreign investors poured money into mines, oil fields, and factories. Mexico City had electric lights and grand European-style buildings. But beneath that image of progress, millions of rural Mexicans had lost their land. Workers struggled in poor conditions. Political power remained concentrated in the hands of President Porfirio Diaz and his inner circle. When Diaz announced he would run for re-election yet again, a wealthy reformer named Francisco I. Madero called for democratic change. The result was revolution. What followed was not a single organized movement. It was a decade of shifting alliances, regional uprisings, and powerful personalities. In the north, Pancho Villa led cavalry forces with dramatic speed and bold tactics. In the south, Emiliano Zapata became the voice of rural farmers, demanding land reform under the slogan, Tierra y Libertad, land and liberty. The revolution was not just about who would govern Mexico. It was about who owned the land, who benefited from economic growth, and what it meant to be Mexican. Between 1910 and 1920, The country experienced chaos, leadership changes, assassinations, and constitutional debates. But out of that instability came something lasting. In 1917, Mexico adopted a new constitution, one of the most progressive of its time. It included land reform provisions, labor protections, limits on foreign ownership of natural resources, expanded state authority over education. The Constitution of 1917 still forms the foundation of Mexico's legal system today. After the violence of the revolution, leaders faced a new challenge: stability. Out of the revolutionary period emerged a dominant political structure that would shape Mexico for most of the 20th century. The Institutional Revolutionary Party, known as the PRI, consolidated power and governed for decades. Under PRI leadership, Mexico pursued industrialization through state-led economic policies. Infrastructure expanded, public education grew. Oil resources were nationalized in 1938, becoming a symbol of sovereignty and national pride. Mexico began to define itself not just politically, but culturally. Artists like Diego Rivera painted massive murals telling the story of indigenous heritage, revolution, and working-class life. Frida Kahlo's deeply personal art gained global recognition. Mexican cinema experienced a golden age, influencing audiences across Latin America and beyond. National identity became a blend of indigenous roots, Spanish heritage, revolutionary ideals, and modern ambition. During World War II, Mexico supported the Allied effort and strengthened economic ties with the United States. Programs allowed Mexican laborers to work temporarily in American agriculture, deepening cross-border connections that continue today. In the post-war decades, Mexico experienced rapid urbanization. Millions moved from rural areas to cities. Mexico City became one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world. The economy grew significantly between the 1940s and 1970s in what some call the Mexican miracle. Industrial output expanded and a middle class developed. However, economic growth was uneven. Rural poverty remained widespread. Political opposition was often suppressed. Student protests in 1968 revealed deep tensions between the government and citizens demanding more democratic freedoms. By the 1980s, Mexico faced severe economic challenges. Debt crises and inflation shook public confidence. The government began shifting toward market-oriented reforms, privatizing industries and opening trade. In 1994, Mexico entered a new era with the North American Free Trade Agreement, strengthening economic integration with the United States and Canada. Manufacturing and exports expanded dramatically. But 1994 also brought political shocks and financial instability. Change was accelerating. In the year 2000, for the first time in over 70 years, the PRI lost the presidency. This marked a historic democratic transition. Mexico had entered a new political chapter. In the 21st century, Mexico has continued evolving. It is now one of the largest economies in Latin America. It plays a central role in North American supply chains. Its cultural influence, through food, music, film, and art, reaches across the globe. Mexican cuisine is recognized worldwide. Festivals like Dia de los Muertos celebrate a unique view of life and remembrance. Spanish and indigenous languages coexist across regions. At the same time, Mexico faces ongoing challenges: inequality, corruption, migration pressures, and public security concerns. These issues shape political debate and public policy. Yet Mexico remains resilient. Its population is young. Its economy is deeply interconnected with global markets. Its history of adaptation, from ancient civilizations to colonial rule, from revolution to modernization, has forged a strong national identity. From the pyramids of Teotihuacan to the skyline of Monterrey, from the canals of ancient Tenochtitlan to the global factories of today, Mexico's story is one of transformation. It is a nation shaped by struggle, creativity, survival, and reinvention. And like every nation with a long history, it continues to evolve, balancing tradition and change, memory and ambition. The history of Mexico is not just a story of the past. It is a story still unfolding,